In this BenchEzy standard settings tutorial, we will be looking at the join tooling tab of our settings. As you'd be aware, our machines that we machine benchtops on must have both clockwise and anti-clockwise rotation tooling so that we don't blow out our rolled edges on our benchtops when we're machining them. So what we're going to do here is set up our tooling for our machining of our benchtops. First of all, we'll look at our clockwise rotation tooling. Now, each machining operation in BenchEzy is set up with a roughing pass and then also a trimming pass. So the first tool we'll look at is for our clockwise rotation tooling, our roughing tool. And as you can see here, I am using an 18 RH standing for right hand rotating tool. This path must be a full Windows path. It must also include the .art extension to the AlphaCam tool drawing file. You can use the browse button to browse to the location of the .art file. The next thing we need to tell BenchEzy is how many cuts we wish BenchEzy to have performed when machining the clockwise roughing tool operation. Now what this is telling us here, I've got that set as 2, so let's assume for a minute that our benchtop is 33 millimeters thick. The first pass of the tool will actually cut down to 16.5 millimeters. The second pass will then cut the remainder of the depth down to the 33 mil. The next setting we're looking at here is the stock to leave. Now because this is a roughing pass, we don't want to trim right to the finished edge of the join, so what we're leaving here is 1 millimeters of stock, which we will then remove with our trimming tool. Same principle applies again. A full Windows path to the .art file. As you can see, I'm using my 18 right hand T for trim tool, and again it must include the .art extension. Of course, we can use the browse button to find the file. Same principle again, we need to tell it what the cut quantity is that we want to use. So because this is a trimming tool, I want to use one pass and take it right back to the finished edge of the join. So by setting this quantity at 1 and the stock to leave at 0, we will do one pass and trim the join right to the join face. The same things apply for the anti-clockwise rotation tooling. And you can see here that for my roughing tool, I'm using an 18 LH or left hand tool. Again, the .art extension must be included, and the settings here are the same as what we've already covered for the clockwise rotation tooling. We'll jump now and we'll have a look at the information that we need to set up Mason's miters. The first thing we'll need to do is look at the length of the offset join. Now, the length of the join offset that we're going to talk about in this particular dimension here is worked out by measuring the distance from, assuming that this is the front of the bench and this is our Mason's miter join. The length of join offset is the distance from where the approach angle starts and then the face of the join. So with the older style aluminium Mason's miter joining jigs, that distance works out to 23.1647 millimeters. So by setting this up at that same measurement, what that does, it allows you the extra precaution that if you have to possibly run a benchtop join by hand using an aluminium joiner jig, it will then still fit and join together properly with a join that has been machined with BenchEzy. The other thing we need to look at is the radius of the join. Now the radius of the join is the radius of the blend between the approach line and the join face. So the radius on this little point here, that is the radius of the join. Moving on now to the football information that we need to set up here. Now the football size is measured from the edge of the top. So let's just use this diagram down here again. So just assume for a minute that this is one of a pair of bench tops that are mitered. So that's not a 90-degree corner, it might be a 135-degree corner. And assuming that both bench tops are rolled on the rear edges, what a lot of people will do is line up the rolls on the front of the bench, and then after the join is completed, they will then knock the back corner off those joins to prevent having the requirement that the front and the back rolls must line up exactly. So by using a football, we alleviate that problem. So now the size of a football is measured from the edge of the top. So assuming that this bench top here is a mitered bench top, and this would be 1/2 of our football here. The distance that we need is the distance from the front edge of the bench, or from the edge of the bench to this point here. So that's the distance measured from the edge of the bench to this point here. So given that being a mitered join, that would mean then the join line would continue back from that point there. The next information that we are going to look at now will be the bastard miter information. Now what we need to do here is give it the length of the join approach. So going back to our diagram here again, it's actually marked on here for us. The length of the join approach is the length of the machining line that starts on the edge of the bench and continues to where the join will then change direction. So that is the length of the approach. The next one will be the radius of the join, which again, the radius of the join is the blend from this part of the operation to the next part of the operation. So it's the radius that would exist on this point here. These dimensions can be set to whatever it is you like. Obviously we don't want them to be too big or too silly. That pretty much covers the bastard miter information. Now quickly we'll then just look at the next section, which is a drip lip. BenchEzy standard is capable of machining a drip lip on the underside of the front of your bench for you. This here is where we set up the information that is needed to allow BenchEzy to be able to do that. Very similar information to what we've already talked about up the top. We need to set up the full Windows path to the .art tool file. Again, we can use the browsing button to find the file. This cut width is telling us that it is the width of cut that we want to use with that particular tool. So using this tool as our example, it's a 6mm right hand tool. So for each pass I want to machine 5mm. I want to machine a 5mm cut. So basically by overlapping that machining operation each and every time, we're going to get a nice flat bottom groove. We're going to tell it next the cut quantity. I want that to be done in one pass, and this is the travel direction of the tool, not the rotation direction, the travel direction. The next one is the drip lip width. That is the width of the actual groove for the drip lip, the depth of the groove for the drip lip, and then the drip lip front offset. Now that is the distance from the front edge of your bench to the edge of the drip lip groove itself. Well, that pretty much covers the join tooling tab of the BenchEzy standard settings. I hope you have found this tutorial informative, and I look forward to talking to you in the next one, where we will move on and talk about joiner bolts. Thank you for watching.